Hello students, yesterday saw that how the dog Tricky actually started to have fun in the company of other dogs there, and he actually start enjoying himself at the surgery. So actually, and the narrator is further saying here is that he had never had such a time in his life before. So he was now living like a dog, and he was completely enjoying himself when he was even catching hens at the old hen house as well. Now let's see further in the next paragraph. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. Here, the student actually ringing a dozen times a day means to say he was calling, sorry, C was calling. Mrs. Pumphrey actually calls the doctor, many times during a day. As you all know that Mrs. Pumphrey was so much passionate about her dog. She actually pampered him a lot. That is why she is so worried for the dog. So she calls so many times to the doctor, to Mrs. Harriet, to ask how is the progress of his dog. And then here the latest bulletins means the latest news. The word bulletin, student, if you do not know, it means news. And ringing a dozen times, it means she used to call almost dozen times in a day to the doctor to ask how the dog is doing. And then when the narrator is saying here that all the while Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background. Hovered anxiously means hovered worriedly, and the word actually, student, hovered means you know when you are hovering, when you are troubled with something, परेशान जब आप हो किसी से, she was totally hovered. She was not calm and cool. She was totally opposite to that situation. He was hovering anxiously in the background means here right now the front stage is actually in the story the surgery place. We are actually seeing only what's happening at the surgery. We are not seeing what happening with Mrs. Pumphrey at her house. So that is actually in the background. That is not at the front right now. That is why the writer is writing here. Mrs. Pumphrey is quite anxious, means worried in the background, and she calls so many times in the day to ask about the dog, how he is doing or not. The narrator actually do not want to answer all her questions. That is why he dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather. Actually, the narrator was actually avoided all those questions which were not necessary for him, which were useless, which he thinks that was not needed, such as Mrs. Pumphrey used to ask him that whether he has turn the cushions over or not properly. Cushions are actually the pillows or the bed sheets on which the Tricky used to sleep, and whether all those have been turned regularly or not. That's what the Mrs. Pumphrey asked. And then she also asked that has he worn the correct dress, correct cloth according to the weather. You all know that the dog Shriki used to wear clothes according to the weather condition, what kind of weather is. So Mrs. Pumphrey, I used to ask all these things, and which doctor do not think are needed. That is why he's dodged all those questions. The word dodged here, student, mean he just avoided all these questions. He didn't want to answer all these questions. You can see the meaning of the word dodged here. You can pause the video and then you can note down the meaning of it. I have written only two words from this page, but actually I have explained you, or I have given you the meaning of only some of the words which you can note down from the video. The words that you do not understand, such I have told you the meaning of NCSL, Hobart, bulletins, so you can note down these words also if you do not understand. Now the main thing here, the student, is that he just told her what was needed, and he just avoided all those questions. He just ignored the questions which the doctor, Mr. Harriot, thought that were not necessary actually. But doctor told her that the dog is actually recovering and he is out of the danger. He told her the things which are important. So he said, it is written here that I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. The word convulsing, a student here mean actually recover. When you recover from your illness, that is known as convulsing. So actually the dog was convulsing rapidly means in a very fast rapid speed, in a fast way. So now the dog was recovering. So Dr. Mr. Harriot told Mrs. Pumphrey that yes, your dog, whose name is Tricky, is out of danger now and he is recovering very fast. Now let's read the third paragraph, students. The word convulsing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. Now, students, as you saw that, when the doctor told Mrs. Pumphrey that the dog is recovering and he is recovering very fast, after hearing that her dog is fit and fine, her dog is recovering well, Mrs. Pumphrey starts sending all those things for the Pumphrey to eat. Actually after eating those, the dog got ill. Again she started to send all those things for his dog Tricky to eat, such as she started to bring round fresh eggs, and then 2 dozens at a time. She started to send 2 dozens eggs at one time, and to build Tricky's strength. She thought that Mrs. Pumphrey thought that Tricky would have got weaker. He had not eaten enough food in last month or so, all the time he was being treated. So now to build him up, to build his strength, Mrs. Humphrey started to send all those things again. The 1 dozen, 2 dozen actually, not 1 dozen, 2 dozen eggs, and then this actually, when Mrs. Pumphrey started to send 2 dozens eggs, this become a very happy period. And for happy period, it becomes a happy period for whom? It becomes a happy period for the partners and I. And who are the partners and I? Actually, the partners of doctor and I is actually all know the narrator of the story, Mr. Harriot, the doctor. For doctor and his partner, it became a very happy period. For all the while Mrs. Pumphrey sent the eggs, because doctor didn't used to give those eggs to Tricky. He actually used to eat them. He along with his partners used to eat all those eggs that Mrs. Pumphrey sent. I had 2 eggs each for breakfast, but when the bottle of wine began to arrive, actually, narrator also started to having 2 eggs in his breakfast. But further, what happens that Mrs. Pumphrey then started to send wine also. Actually, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. Now, it in the on the whole household, it was like a morning. It was like the morning coming of a, it was the beginning of something new. It was the beginning of great possibilities, some real possibilities. Now the narrator here is describing you that when Mrs. Pumphrey started to send wine, it became a great real possibility of a new beginning for the narrator and his partner, because now they would start to now they would have the pleasure of drinking also, because doctor is never going to give those wine to the Tricky. He would drink that wine himself along with his partner. So it has become a great period for the narrator and his partners, because all those things, the wine and eggs that Mrs. Pumphrey used to send for for Tricky, the doctor and his partner used to eat themselves. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Mrs. Pumphrey actually sent wine. Why did she send? She sent blood. She sent wine actually to enrich Tricky's blood, because red wine, is can increase the hemoglobin in your blood. No, it is believed. The Mrs. Pumphrey thought that it is good for blood, so she actually starts sending wine for the dog. Lunch became so for first read, then I will explain. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with the 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. Now, for the doctor and his partners, the lunch actually became a very ceremonial occasion. Before that, the lunch used to be just an ordinary thing for them. They just like a simple occasion. They just eat a day to day eat. But when we use ceremonial means to say that you know it was an occasion of it was a festive type of situation, or in simple word if you want to say, student, it was like a party or function. If a party, if something like party or function is going on, just like that, they started to have their daily meal. Now for them, their daily meal become a ceremonial meal, because during the daily meal they started to have 2 glasses of wine, and not only before the meal but also after the meal. So in a way, student, you can also think that this period was good for Tricky. He started to recover. He started to feel healthy. He started to participate in physical activities. So it was good period for the Tricky, but for doctors and for his partner, it became. I think it will be not good for their harm, because now they are eating a lot and they are drinking also. Plus but you are also going to know that here, student, why Tricky was so ill before that, because Mrs. Pumphrey was actually giving him drink also, giving him wine also to drink. So if a dog would drink wine regularly or eat so many things without doing any physical activity, so it's very obvious that he would become ill. And it is not only for a dog, it is for you also. If you eat a lot of things during the day and if you do not do any physical activity, then it's not good for your health too. So this is a learning from this phase. Student, tomorrow we will continue our story and hopefully finish the story also.